I actually want to start with the proposition, and I've thought about this, literally since 2009 and 2010, when they were debating the healthcare bill, about how, in many ways, the people who are working on healthcare, whether it's the reporters or the flacks or the lawmakers, were living like these incredibly unhealthy lives. And I talked to so many people who would tell me that they would eat, they would get mad at you, they would smoke cigarettes, they would get vending food machine for dinner. I talked to this one guy who hadn't seen his wife for yeah, well, there you go. But I mean, it's true though. I mean, in some respects, we all, anyone who covered it, lived incredibly unhealthy lives. Right? I mean, that was the price of admission.
I remember I went to the dentist the day after one of the, I forget what it was. It was some late night thing.
Found time to go to the dentist.
I literally fell asleep in the dentist's chair. And I tweeted something like, thanks Obamacare. I think it was right after it passed. Maybe it was in March, right after it passed. Because I was first noticeable impact on my healthcare is I fell asleep at the dentist. There was no Novocaine involved. I just literally fell asleep.
How many cavities?
That means that you got all the benefits of that very expensive sedation dentistry thing that insurance doesn't cover without having to pay for it.
Yeah, so that was great. I was very cost effective at my healthcare.
Yeah, what was the least healthy? She obviously had a surreal moment of. Never heard of anyone falling asleep in a dentist chair, but I mean, it was generally true though, right? People it was miserable, right?
Oh yeah. Oh no, go ahead.
I think that's when I was first diagnosed with hypertension.
Is that true?
Seriously, I was dead serious. I was at Congressional Quarterly. I'm trying to remember the exact timing. It was either 2009 or a year before. And Congressional Quarterly brought in a health screening thing, and I went to have my blood pressure taken, and the lady was like, "It's 165 over 100." She's like, "You need to go to the doctor immediately."
Whoa, that's serious.
Yeah, no, it was
We're not messing around.
Full-on hypertension.
Wow.
I actually have a very specific memory of something gross, but before I tell that, I do have to ask, do you think that as someone with a pre-existing condition, you can write about this subject objectively?
Yeah, you disclose at the bottom.
Obviously, totally conflicted.
I can imagine, because you get booted right off.
Should I disclose that to the viewers? I'm sorry.
The good news, in the meantime, everyone should know is that Bloomberg has terrific health benefits, the best I've ever had.
Yeah.
So I have a very specific memory. So, look, there's no reason anybody who read these stories would know about this, but for months, all of us, and it was probably 20 people or more at its height, spent a lot of our waking hours between, 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. standing in a hallway outside of Senator Max Baucus' office, and in the adjoining
8 a.m.
Yeah, well, sometimes.
I didn't get there.
Occasionally, very occasionally, when there was a reason to. If I found out that other people were going to be there, for example, like somebody from Politico, maybe, for example.
Yeah, okay.
Right. So, in the adjoining building, and I'm hoping somebody else remembers this, there was a vending machine that made hot dogs.
So gross.
And it would spit out.
What do you mean you made hot dogs? Didn't it have pre-made, or they actually
created the sauce?
I wish that it worked.
I don't want to visualize it
Making the top of it.
No, little grinder going on there.
I think there was a toaster mechanism on the inside that would heat up a hot dog and then drop it into a bun and then feed it out to you. Well, I made I made a lot of jokes about this. Anybody have one of these vending machine hot dogs? And then I finally had to succumb at one point because the cafeterias were closed. It was probably 9 o'clock at night. I hadn't eaten all day, and I ate the vending machine hot dog. And the absolute worst thing is, it wasn't bad.
Well, why did it take so long? I mean, it took what? How many months?
About a year and a half. Yeah. Which is, by the way, in many people's minds, rushing.
Yeah.
That was rushing?
That
was rushed through
people still
Congress.
talk about that.
No one got a chance to read it.
Every time anyone says that, I remember how much, whatever, this is my job, but how much of my life I've had to put on hold that entire time. It did not seem rushed to me, and the staff had it even worse. Because they were in hours before we got there and hours after we left.
To me, the clock started election night. For me, it literally did start election night, 2008.
Yeah.
Election night 2008. From the moment Obama got elected, we knew that there was going to be this effort. I was already talking to people who were already preparing for the transition, who were already working. I started doing stories about, what it might look like. Baucus put out his blueprint. I think a week or two after the election. I mean, they were already gearing up, and it just, you know, I date the effort on this literally from election night through
Ted
passage.
Kennedy was already starting to set up meetings with healthcare industry people.
Well, he'd
around
already
the same
been
time.
doing those.
That's right. You're right. I think actually
They
back to the summer.
predated them, yeah.
They wanted to have something there for Obama to pick up, basically.
That's
Basically,
right.
you know, I mean,
I think they wanted to, like, I think Congress wanted to take it over before, even before Obama
Before
had
Obama
a
could get
chance
his hands on
to
it.
put a plan out there. They gave Baucus a huge amount of leash, and he spent months in futility, as it turned out.
I feel like that's what like
Safer word.
sticks out to me as taking so long. Like there's this whole effort to make it bipartisan legislation.
Yeah.
Max Baucus and Chuck Grassley had a history of actually nothing on this scale, but of actually getting things done, or at least getting close.
Yeah.
You know, like even a year before that, they almost got through an expansion of the children's health insurance program. There was a sticking point with the White House, and a whole bunch of stuff went on from there, but it almost happened. So to me, like having covered those two as a pair for years, it didn't seem insane.
So was
that
it
they
when-
might find some way to get
And it
together.
was a Republican plan. That's why they
Yeah.
did it
That's
that
right.
way. I mean,
I
you
did
have
not
to
fully
remember, it was
appreciate how
originally
much-
a Republican
How much the
plan.
politics inside the Republican Party were
By
changing already.
By August, the Republicans had agreed to tons of stuff that wound up in. They had agreed fundamentally to a Medicaid expansion, to exchanges, to an individual mandate, to subsidies to help buy insurance. They had agreed to virtually
pretty much
everything
the law.
in the bill. Yeah,
So
Grassley
they
and
both
Hatchett
mandated,
agreed to that.
basically.
The abortion
Well,
was a
until they
hang up.
did.
So they were hung up on abortion throughout July. This is my memory of this.
Yeah.
And then August hit, and everything just went to hell.
And remember, the very first part of the administration, they were working on the stimulus. It was so much like the Clinton fight, where at the beginning they did stimulus bill, they did the budget, and then they waited for health reform. And they wanted. Remember, Rahm Emanuel was you know the Obama's chief of staff, and he'd been there during Clinton, and he knew that waiting too long, you lost it. So they had this really sort of ridiculously too fast timeline that you knew they weren't going to make. But in the end, it didn't take that long. For something of
It
this,
didn't take that long?
for
It felt like
something-
an eternity.
For something of this magnitude, it didn't take that long. But remember, I mean, what led up to this though was that you
And I'll
had
keep drinking.
you had the insurance industry, you had the hospital industry, you had the drug industry. You had them all lined up ready to do this. I mean, that was why, you know, when Baucus's white paper came out, the whole thing was completely teed up and ready to go.
Yeah.
All he had to do was pull the trigger, which Obama almost didn't do. I think this has been not very well reported. Obama almost was ready to not do health reform at all. He had to be
Are you
talked
talking
into
about
it.
when they did early on, or are you talking
Early.
about after Scott Brown won?
Well, the economy
No,
was going to hell,
early
so-
on.
okay,
No,
yeah.
not after. No, early on in 2009, not after Scott Brown. He almost didn't make health reform.
The idea being that he needed to focus every effort
on the tanking economy.
And then there's the fact that I think that a lot of people, I mean, I know that I did, underestimated the extent to which, even though the Democrats controlled the entire Congress and the White House, what that meant is that every faction within that party felt it had the leverage to demand what it wanted. The more conservative Democrats always
They
had
knew.
that leverage.
No, they knew.
Because they knew that, like, you know, that Sherrod Brown was going to vote for a bill that provided health insurance to millions of
Yeah,
low and
never
middle
walked
income
away,
people if the alternative was nothing.
Yeah.
But I mean, actually, speaking of these centrists, like I was thinking about this earlier in terms of like very small memories. But you know, Ben Nelson was at the middle of all of this, right? Ben Nelson was the consummate 60th vote for everything at all times, which meant that
He was the Hamlet of this entire drama.
Yes,
So was
right.
Barry Landrew.
And it was never totally clear to me
Nelson
that there
more
was
than anybody else,
a
I
set of
think.
principles that were so important to him that he had to make sure they represented. It was just like, no, now I want this and I want that, which
The principles were, I want to benefit Nebraska.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, right, and that had been working for him for a while.
Forever.
So what that meant
I
was.
don't think it was that simple. To be fair to Ben Nelson, I don't think it was that simple.
Ben Nelson apologist.
So what I think that meant, so one of the things that resulted from this is that people like us were way more interested than we would normally be in a mild-mannered senator from a Midwestern state who didn't chair any major committees.
Yeah.
So when he'd come off the Senate floor by the space near the elevators in the Senate, every time he'd come off the floor, he'd get swarmed by reporters.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just healthcare; it was other stuff going on too. But like, you know, most of it was healthcare during that time period. I remember one day where he came off the floor, and no one came over to talk to him, and he walked up the floor and stopped. And waited, and I was watching from about 4 feet away,
like a sad
and I was watching. No, because he had that senator smile, you know, like they all wear it.
Yeah.
So he stood there for, I don't know, I'd say about 3-4 beats before he realized, oh, no one's coming over here, and then actually started walking to the elevator. And I like to think, and I don't know this, I like to think that he was bummed out.
Did you go up and ask him how the weather looks today?
Yeah, this is after health reform.
No, this is during it.
Oh.
It was just one day where, for whatever reason, either some other senator was the one, Lieberman, somebody else. It could have been Bernie Sanders.
For me, there really was one sort of searing memory, and that was that Sunday that the House passed the bill, because that was, I mean, in March. In March.
With the rallies going on outside.
Yeah, that was the strangest day in my entire. I mean, I've been more than 25 years covering the Capitol. It was a Sunday, which was already odd, but I mean, the outside it was like a siege mentality.
And they would all walk out and greet them and say from the balcony.
People were having trouble getting to and from the Capitol. There were so many protesters. On the one hand, it was an incredibly historic day. I mean, so you can't walk through the Capitol without this sense of history.
Yeah.
You were pretty sure the House was going to pass, but remember the abortion issue was still kind of front and center. That was the day the president had to issue his executive order to finally round up those last few recalcitrant Democrats. So there was always this question of, oh my God, is it really going to pass? You had these, this really vocal and sometimes very hostile, very large crowd outside protesting. There was a moment I remember Michelle Bachmann went out on the balcony of the Speaker's lobby and had what I called an Evita moment, where she was standing out there and this huge,
She started singing.
Pretty much everything but. I mean, it was just.
That is a really loaded reference.
The most memorable moment for me, though, was I remember when Congressman Lewis, Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, and other members walked from, I think it was Rayburn, but I might be wrong, to the Capitol.
I was
and they
there
walked
when they came
arm in
in.
arm.
Yeah.
I still have the video on my iPhone, actually, because it was intense. And it was, at points historical, but at points really uncomfortable, because people were shouting. People shouted gay epithets at Congressman Frank. There was all the reports of spitting on Congressman Lewis and Congressman Clyburn. It was a really intense moment. I've never been in a situation like that prior to or since then.
Really fair, I think.
This is a great segue, because I've always wondered if the White House had like a smart, a logical, a competent media strategy for passing healthcare and selling healthcare. I think the answer is pretty self-evident. They haven't done a very good job.
Obama stopped talking about it for like 2 years after the law was passed. We didn't
Was
hear
that a strategic decision, though?
I don't know what it. I don't know. It was a stupid decision, I think. Like he just wouldn't. He never went out and promoted the law, talked about it. It was like he was embarrassed about it.
But I feel like I don't know. I feel like they did talk about it. Like you had like the 6-month provisions, like the age 26 thing, the no copays on preventative coverage.
Kathleen Sebelius introduced
I
on
think
conference calls with
They
reporters.
never had a structured messaging strategy. I did 2 different stories on the fact that they never had a structured messaging strategy. And I actually had Nancy Antiparle in one of my stories saying that messaging was not their priority, that implementing the law was their priority.
Well, they didn't do that very well either.
That's not very flattering either.
This was before.
I mean, I like in a much more picayune way, like what's frustrated me is every request is treated as hostile. And sometimes I just want to understand.
Do you think that's
what's
them or is that you, Jeff?
It's a bit of both.
Fortunately for me,
I've
been around long enough that I have a basis for comparison. And like, people don't believe me when I say this, but at the agency level anyway, not so much the White House, Health and Human Services, CMS, whatever. Like, the previous administration, who I covered for all 8 years, and a tiny bit of the Clinton administration before, I didn't get the same feeling. They could discern when a story was going to be difficult for them, and when it was just, I just need to understand what this is.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I get that from these folks for the most part.
Yeah.
One individual here and there notwithstanding, it's either a strategy to be difficult or the lack of a strategy that results.
To it, right?
Yes, a constant defensiveness. You could ask someone like, I was just checking in, is the president still handsome today? And
they'd say off the record.
Off the record, no.
Yeah. Is that an indictment of us, though? I mean, have we not done our jobs?
Yes.
I don't know. I always
You think
feel
so?
Well, I think
a
I
little
think I've
bad.
done my
partly.
job.
Well, present company accepted. I think the media writ large have not done a really great job.
I mean, what are your gripes? Play the role of media critic.
One of the things that makes me completely crazy is that during all the completely blanket coverage of the exchange rollout, everybody kept forgetting to mention that the individual market is 5% of how people get covered. Everybody acted like, oh my God, this is the way everybody in America is going to get their health care. It's like, no, this is the way 5% of America is going to get their health care. That was an incredibly important piece of context that almost nobody ever mentioned.
But I think it goes back to this small and big aspect of the healthcare law. It's being sold as a big change to American healthcare that actually affects a very small group of people. It's most people.
Other pieces of it. I mean, the thing is that there's so many pieces of it. Yeah.
Sure, but they're right. But as me as a Vox employee, I don't feel like my healthcare changed.
How was your healthcare
this year? It's pretty good. It's pretty
My theory is that the administration really screwed this up because they weren't forthcoming about the website problems, which made it into a larger story. They had made, obviously, the campaign era pledge of keeping it
media, by the way.
What?
Including myself to some extent. In the summer of...
I feel like we should have been better.
Oh, yeah. In the summer of 2013...
About reporting on the problems.
About the technology?
Yeah.
We should have been...
This is my theory, though. There was very little way to know that, right?
There was.
There was a good Wall Street Journal story. I remember, I think it was Luis and Chris did it the week before.
What did it say?
What was it? It was about the subsidies were being determined wrong. It wasn't all the problems, but it was. I thought it was the best warning sign.
I think, obviously, this was a story that should have been told, right?
Yeah.
But if you look back now at the way things seem to have actually played out, it's not totally clear to me that many people who were actually working on this website realized it wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
So if we'd even asked them...
You do?
Who?
I think lots of
I think people working on the website knew. I don't know if a lot of people in the White House were aware.
In retrospect, though, isn't it amazing that there was not more leakage?
Right.
Yes.
From the contractors?
Stunning.
My impression is that no one wanted to be like, hey, President Obama, we screwed up your signature.
Yeah.
Obviously the alternative isn't better.
Right.
My question is, did they ever have this discussion about could we delay it and then what would happen?
We don't know the answer to it.
The closest thing that I've seen to that is Stephen Brill's story in Time about the tech people that came in to try and help out after it was a total disaster. And according to that story, I think this might have actually come, well, I don't want to say, I can't remember who he sourced it to, but apparently Obama actually said at one point, in mid-October, do we need to shut this thing down or not?
Yeah.
But that was after.
Because you didn't tell me it was broken.
That was after.
Now it's broken. Can we fix it or not? Because if we can't fix it, let's shut it down. It's a weird thing where it wasn't a case where they were hiding the information from us. They didn't know.
Oh my God, the great
Which is
834
worse.
debate.
Yeah, but I remember thinking back at the time, everyone's getting
great
very...
white whale.
You were relentless. You asked every conference call. It was it marked the fact that conference call existed was when you asked the 834
Finally, there was a call where 4 different reporters.
It was me and you and Louise.
And Phil Klein was training. They won't let me ask a question.
Really sad they never came in
They don't know.
What was the most overblown controversy about this whole rollout? I mean, there were legitimate ones. I'm not going to deny it. They clearly were. But there were a lot of overblown controversies and a lot of things that people freaked out about that ended up in retrospect being sort of silly.
I feel like canceled plans were both written about too much and not written about enough in the right way.
Yeah.
Well, it is. But because everybody focused on, oh my God, all these people got their plans canceled at the same time at the end of the year. How many were there? And there was sort of an assumption that all of these people got screwed, that they had their plan canceled and they wound up having to pay more for insurance. We still don't know today, after voluminous reporting on this, how many people had their plans canceled, how many of them went to the exchange and got a better deal, and how many wound up having to pay twice or 3 times as much.
And once again, we missed the context, which is every year a certain number, a certain percentage of people in the individual market get their plans canceled.
The canceled plans thing caught me off guard because I knew that lots of people had insurance that wasn't compliant with the law. But I didn't figure the insurance companies would decide the way to rectify that was to say your plan is canceled. I thought they'd be like, hey, it's better now. It costs more.
I don't know that all of them were saying it was canceled.
But that's the way it came through.
A lot of insurance companies tried to renew.
Right.
Here's a renewal notice. It's going to cost twice as much. Please don't look around in the exchange for a better deal.
I think that was ham-fisted, and I think as much as they've been trying to hold on to their customers by not telling them, oh, there's someplace else you can go, I think that maybe was a little short-sighted on their part because insurance is now the same thing as Obamacare in a lot of people's minds. To define.
This is where the divide was between the policy people and the political people, because I remember vividly talking with a political operative who works in healthcare, you know, before the cancel plans thing was a cancel plans thing. And this person said to me, we are about to be in a world of hurt. This is going to blow up as an issue. You have no idea how bad this is going to be. I said, what are you talking about? No, you know, the website's a real problem. She's like, forget the website. There are going to be canceled plans and people are going to freak the fuck out. And they did.
To this day, you've got Republicans running around saying, in our state, more people lost coverage than gained it.
Which is fiction, right?
Right.
It's false. It's not just false. It's impossible. You know.
So my standout controversy, which I don't know if Jeff is ready to talk about or not, is this guy Chad Henderson.
Oh God.
Which is
You know the story.
Do I?
Which is a much smaller controversy than any of these.
You wouldn't have written it anyway.
So there was I want to say it's October 2nd.
I think I know this story. Yeah.
It's October 2nd or October 3rd, and all of us are like, where is someone who has signed up for Obamacare?
Oh yes, I know this story.
We can't find someone who signed up for Obamacare. And this group in rural America is like,
because there was 4.
We found someone. His name is Chad. He lives in
Tennessee.
I actually randomly found this guy on Twitter.
Oh,
Somebody
I found him through Enroll America.
Nobody actually brought this guy to me.
So
I was looking at Twitter that night and I saw it and
Enroll America said, hey, there's this guy Chad.
Did Ann Flippich write you personal apologies for this whole thing, by the way? What? Did Ann Flippich write personal apologies to you guys about this?
I didn't actually deal with them for this story. No.
So this guy Chad, he lived in Tennessee, or he went to college in Tennessee, and he lived somewhere else.
I think he lived in Georgia.
Yeah, but he went to college in Tennessee.
Northern Georgia and near the Tennessee.
Yeah, so all of us are calling Chad.
Yeah, he was in every story.
He was literally we got and we had done our interview because he's like, oh, the Wall Street Journal is calling, I have to go. And I was like, okay. And this is this 19 or 20-year-old community college student who said he had successfully signed up for Obamacare.
It's a good thing there aren't death panels, Chad.
Peter Sutterman at Reason later did some follow-up Chad reporting and called Chad's dad. And it turns out Chad had not enrolled in insurance. He had picked a plan but not actually paid for it.
You were going to rhyme the whole thing, Chad's
No,
dad
so we actually were making jokes in one blog. We had this Chad dad, mad, sad. It can really go on.
He also had no idea that his son had been in the news. He'd been in Politico, the Washington Post, the Huffington Post, the Wall Street Journal. I think there was at least one more. Oh, local news, local television news. His father had no idea.
Because it was a total shit show.
I called Chad back and be like, Chad, what's the deal? You told me you enrolled. And he's like, well, no, I said I had picked a plan.
I'm so sad you were bad.
Exactly. That's pretty much how it went down.
What did he say?
He said no, I never said I enrolled. He was clearly kind of caught in the middle of this.
So how does he go about telling people he's enrolled and then I never
well,
actually said
the thing that threw me is because he told me the price of his plan. I figure, if he told me the price, clearly he purchased something. He's like, no, that's just the price of the plan in my shopping cart. And it became this giant mess of well, no one's paid. Chad hasn't paid, nobody has paid, everybody's Chad. And it was just so messy, and it was just it was
I spent 40 minutes on the phone with this kid. 40 minutes. I even looked up the plan on the insurance company's website because healthcare.gov didn't work, so I couldn't do it there. Because he told me what company it was, what the name of the plan was, what the price was with his subsidy. I found that plan. It was all about his. And
has anyone talked to this guy since?
Oh, he came to the State of the Union.
Yeah.
He was what's his name's guest.
He was no.
He was a
No,
it was a conservative congressman.
Conservative latched on to this.
Yeah.
He joke invited him, and Chad was like, "Yeah, I'm coming."
Oh my God! It's I wouldn't miss it for the world.
But ever since interviewing Chad, I've actually asked people I interview who say they've enrolled to send me a screenshot of their final enrollment screen because it just became a thing. Yeah, I was scarred by my Chad experience.
I made a bet with someone about whether this will be an issue in 2016, not 2014, and whether the Republican candidates will run on full repeal. And I said yes. I think they will.
I think they will too.
Gets a little complicated though,
right?
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
First of all, but not only is it the obvious thing where by a few years from now, especially in some states, this will be really ingrained in a pretty boring way.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Unless there's another blow up, and I think it's fair to say we've all been caught by surprise by stuff.
Sure.
Turned to huge conflagrations.
Supreme Court.
The Medicaid thing.
Yeah, the Medicaid thing.
I don't remember anybody predicting that. No. But at the same time, when you've got Mike Pence and Chris Christie doing Medicaid expansion, even while going, also I hate Obamacare, but they still did it, you know. Which, never mind Obamacare, what Medicaid expansion is spending more money so that poor people can go to the doctor. Yeah. That's not a very Tea Party
thing. But this is precisely why I think it's going to be an
with.
issue in 2016. It's like you have some Republican governors who clearly want to run, who bought into the Medicaid expansion, and you'll have some real diehards who say this is, you know, socialism run amok.
Bobby Jindal.
Bobby Jindal, for instance, who will use this as a cudgel. And so it is going to be a feature in 2016. I just don't see a way around it.
Republican, you run on Obamacare in the primary, and you run on something else in the general election.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. But then the whole idea of repealing a law where, you know, millions have signed up, and you've based the past like half year on, you know, not taking coverage away from someone. How can you then turn around and say, you know what, I want to take coverage away from all these people who signed up through the exchanges? It just strikes me as totally incompatible.
There's been a lot written by like conservative journalists and
acknowledge
opinion writers about like, now that we've made a big deal about how no one's current insurance should ever be changed, ever, even if it's terrible. Yeah. It should still always be the same forever. You've just boxed yourself in.
Well, there will never be a consensus Republican plan because they're never going to get together and they're going to be able to rationalize their pro-market and their pro-business factions within the Republican Party. It was a small miracle that the Democrats ever came together. I mean, that was just the idea that this ever happened. I still, you know, every morning I wake up and like, this actually became law. How did that happen?
Kind of crazy.